online, or mostly online. You know what? I forgot to pop open Twitch TV's chat. Let me do that real quick, just so that the Twitchers aren't left in the lurch here. There we go. Pop that out and close that. All right. Now I can see what the Twitchers say. Okay. So, here we are. We're back at it, doing more with the Draco model tool. We're just getting fired up. So let me open up some DevTools. Start our host environment. Again, this is just Google App Engine. You've done a pretty good job of making this straightforward and easy to use. And then we'll open up a web browser. We'll bring that down to a different screen. And pop that open in a new window. Here we go. And then what else do we do? I don't need. Well, you know what? I'm going to need MySQL. So I'll just log into MySQL and zoom in so folks can see when I'm screwing things up in MySQL, and turn on PHP Storm. Okay. So, I did a little bit of work between last week and this week. I did. I worked on... Now where's my LiveCoding window? It says I have two... Yeah, there it is. Sorry, LiveCoding chat up there. Between last week and this week, I just worked on some bugs. Stuff that I knew needed to happen, but wasn't going to be terribly exciting, so I just went and dealt with it. So I'll show that to you here in just a sec when I go over everything. Alright, looks like we are online, and we have MySQL up. Draco model. Excellent. Alright, so what we are dealing with is, and for some reason when I leave the page and come back it has a problem. So this is Draco Model, which is a software modeling tool. So the idea is that we're able to come in here and design our model, come up with an object or a group of objects, like a person. This is a healthcare one, so the person, which has a gender and chronic conditions and some other just random stuff as I was testing out various features, so this got a little cluttered up. And you're able to enter in all the things about a person: first name, family name, birth date, common name, that kind of thing. Except for common name was actually part of chronic condition at one point. Again, there's a lot of testing going on. But once you build out one of these entities, you can go over and render code, and so you can say, hey, JavaScript, and then here's some actual JavaScript where it has first name, family name, birth date, again, common name, ICD-10 code, and that kind of looks funky because it's an acronym, known symptoms, ailments, gender. So this is actual JavaScript that would actually works, and so that is... basically rendered off of this code. And you can also do a database. So here's a MySQL database that's based off of the healthcare, so you can see the healthcare project, and so you can see person, first name, family name, birth date, all that good stuff in tables in a MySQL database. And then for our enumerations, right, we have some inserts for the enumerations to go into that enumeration table, that kind of thing. C++ doesn't actually work. The PHP actually does. So there's a number of different programming languages and tools that you can render code to. And the idea is that this will be extensible, so you have a high-level model and then you render all of the boring code off of that. So things I worked on over the weekend. One is I changed the layout of the enumerations a little bit so these arrows would line up correctly. That was really important to me. They had been overlapping, which looked fine in some cases, but honestly, when this box got rendered above it, that meant that you couldn't see the arrow end, and that was a problem. So this is much nicer. The other thing is, for some of these, it used to be that when you loaded from the server, if the lines wouldn't update right if you moved the target, so they'd only update if you moved the source of the line as opposed to the target. And now we have it set up so that if you move the source or the target of the line, that it will update the line appropriately, and that provides a much smoother, nicer user experience. Apparently something just happened. I don't know. Like something just crashed or... So we have this render.php AABBYYYY string. I'm going to look into this real quick. Okay, well, no, that looks fairly normal. Oh, right, that was in the, yeah, that was in the render section of the code. Alright, AABBYYY. Alright, so that was just a leftover check from when I was dealing with a bug. So let's go ahead and clean that out. We don't need that anymore. So we're having a little bit of trouble with this visualization code. It just crashes every now and then. I'm not getting a lot of diagnostic information. It's certainly working a lot better than it was, even last week. So I'm not going to rip it out and redo from start just yet. But I'm certainly on my way to thinking about doing that. One of the things that we added as well... Oh, hey, Joshua911, welcome aboard. One of the other things that we added, or I added over the weekend, was dealing with parents. So a person, each entity or interface can have parents that they inherit from. Standard object-oriented programming type of stuff. Now, different languages handle that different ways, and again, that's going to be up to the renderer to figure out how they want to do it. But what I wanted to address here is the fact that these relationships exist. So we've had in the database for a while now this cross-reference entity, parents to entity relationship. So this table has been there, and it's been empty, and it's gone unused. So I've gotten part of the way there, that a person, right, will have parents, and you can say something abstract, and it goes ahead and it creates that relationship, and it puts that in the database, actually. And then we can go to the parents, and we can say chronic conditions, and now it'll also inherit from chronic conditions. Maybe we'll go ahead and get rid of this relationship to ailments, chronic conditions. Yeah, go ahead and delete that. Oh, except for that didn't work. Son of a... Oh, there it goes. And so we have these two parent-child relationships, which is fine, and those exist in the database, which is wonderful, right? From entity and to entity, that's great. And it doesn't load when I refresh the page, right? So we've gotten the insert and update stuff, or some insert stuff going on, but we're not actually reading that from the database and doing anything with it. So that's what we're going to be up to today, is saying, oh crap, these relationships exist. We're actually going to need to pull that data from the database and make use of it so we can show it back to the user, which actually makes sense. So that is what we are going to do. Oh, and we also got CodeScript in here, a few other familiar faces. Good to have folks along. All right. Let's see. So, parent-child relationships, that is going to all go under the guise of entity update, I believe, is where we're doing our parent IDs, right? So if not the parent ID property, just update the darn thing. Parent IDs deal with those. So this does some security checks and some existence checks, and then a bunch of it cleans stuff out, and then inserts a bunch of things one after another. And we could make it more efficient, but we're not going to for now. There's no real reason to optimize it until we know it needs to be optimized. So we're going to leave that alone. Go away, PHP Storm. Stop talking to me. All right. That's wonderful, but we're also not getting back when we read the entities. So you'll notice when we read an entity, we have been creating the connection, and then we do this read statement, and we pass in these parameters, and we get everything back. And we do that all in one giant batch because when we're loading data from the database, we really read one model at a time. And we're not reading a part of a model or something like that. So we just read everything that's related to that model in the database, which is fine. So now we just need to include that in this. The way we've done it before, and I did actually kind of like it. Let's see, I think it was with the member. Nope. No, it was not. Oh, it was the enumeration, with the enumeration and the values. So with the enumerations and the values. Oh, you didn't know it was possible, metaprogramming with the JavaScript. I wasn't 100% sure it was going to work when I started this project, but now that I'm into it, it's actually working way better than I thought. Okay, so let's see here. This is a two-part, right? When we have an enumeration, there is the enumerations themselves and then the enumeration values. And so we read these side by side because there's no case in which we read the enumerations but we wouldn't read the values for the enumerations. So we load them both up at the same time, and then we put them in one data result and provide that back. I think we should do the same thing with the entities and the entities' parents, because the parent-child relationship is a simple reference. It's not where we have like a complex sub-object. We're dealing with fairly straightforward, just list of relationships. So what we can do, first thing first, is let's think about our query that we're going to do. We already know, well, we're doing this for all the entities. We're not just doing it for one entity. We're not reading one, we're reading them all. Okay, so that's fine. We just need to think through this a little bit, and we'll experiment. So there's no model reference in this cross-reference table. It's a very simple table, and that's fine. We will do just fine with that. But we will need to know everybody that is part of this model. So we will select entity, actually public ID v from entity table, where model FK is equal to our current model. And I know I don't know that ID right off, but here it is. Thank you, debug statements. Select. Okay, empty set one warning. Of course, it doesn't tell me what that warning is. Show columns from entity table. Select entity ID from entity table where model foreign key. Ah, right. Alright, so we need the entity table and the model table, where m.public idv is equal to that. Okay, so here are all of the entities. And e.model fk just as sanity check. Look at that. Model foreign key both 1 and 2, and I know that is not correct. Oh, yes, where m public ID is that, and m.public m dot model ID is equal to e dot model fk. Aha! All right. So we're narrowing it down. We're getting the entity ID, all of the entities for that model. That looks correct. What else do we need? We need the entities public key, public ID, sorry, not public key, public ID. There we go. All right, so there's the entities and the public IDs, and then we're also going to need to know So those are the IDs and the public IDs. And that doesn't touch our cross-reference table yet. And the name of our cross-reference table, just to make sure that I get it right, cross-reference entity, parents to entity. All right, so we'll call that table X. So the public ID has to be, the model has to be that ID. The model has to match the model ID has to match the entity's model ID. And the from entity foreign key is equal to e.model ID. Nope, not model ID, entity ID. All right, so entity ID 6, which is in model 2, has that public ID. Person, and then it ends with a DB. Yep. So that's correct. Now it's showing up twice because we have 2 entries in our cross-reference entity parents to entity table. So now we just need to figure out how the heck we get those next to it. So let's go ahead and at least select these. And so we'll say x.from public ID, oh, no, from entity FK. Yep, that's 6. And then we need .to entity FK. Oops. Helps if I don't randomly put the number 9 in my select statement. Alright. We can get rid of the model foreign key. We know that we're pulling everything from the proper model. And we don't need the entity ID. That is redundant because we know that's the from entity foreign key. So now we just need to grab, yeah, so that looks good. So now we just need to get that to entity key. Ooh. I did that wrong. ID. Wrong column. Okay, so the public ID is as from public ID v. All right, so that's the from public ID. Okay. How the heck do I do this, actually? I'm a little rusty on MySQL. Because we have the from public ID and the from entity, and we know that that's a one-to-one relationship. And so now we just need to find the to entity ID. All right, so we're going to copy that off. Make sure that we have a copy of that. All right. And those are the proper destinations. So I can get the sources or the destinations in a single statement without too much struggle. Some good resource about metadata in JavaScript. Not that I've found. I have a fair amount of experience doing this in C# and other programming languages, and I just know JavaScript, so I'm really banking on my previous experience in other languages. So I don't have that many resources, I'm afraid. Okay. It is based on knowledge in other languages, yep. Okay. All right. So I might be able to do this. From entity table E and entity table F. Yeah, no, don't cancel. All right. And then from entity table E, entity table F, model table, cross-reference table. Where X entity and F. Yeah. Let's see if that works. Nope. Does it just not like the spacing that happened to come through now that I wouldn't think so, but from entity table WH. Okay. I think it doesn't like this. Of course, what's going to happen then is actually, hold on. To entity FK. He is. I don't think it's going to like this at all. Line 1, yeah. Oh. Well, I also have the spare comma. Did I have that before? I did. I totally did. Totally had that spare comma there. Hey, here we go. Well, better. Okay, so it does like this double reference to one table. So in this particular case, I'm using the entity table twice. Need pen. Pen. Pen good. All right, let's talk this through in Paint. Paint, huzzah. All right. So here's how it goes. We have one database table, and that is our entity table. We're going to label that with a big ol' E. Now, the thing is that we also have our cross-reference table. Now, our cross-reference table is a parent table, and so we have two cells in it, right? And both of these point back toward the entity table, which means that when you do a query with this, right, you are saying, I want to select, some column name from the entity table where a condition is true. The problem is that we need this entity table twice if we need this column name once for here. Here, I read, right? So we need it once for here, and then we need it another time here. For those that are colorblind, we won't use red and green. We'll use red and blue. So we'll do it once for here and once for there, right? So both of these values, so we don't want these IDs, we want these public IDs. So one of these rows has the blue value, the other one has the red value, but they're both in the same column. So what we're doing is in our code, we'll see that we'll select a bunch of stuff, and we're not that worried about it right now, but so we have entity table E and entity table F. So basically one of these is the red reference to the entity table so that I can get the proper ID. The other one is the blue reference to the entity table so I can get the other ID. So it keeps my references to the entity table distinct, right? So that I can do where clauses on either of them. And it's not ambiguous anymore. So that's one of the big reasons to use aliasing, is so that you can do that. So again, we make sure that everybody's in this model. This model is the what, and all of these entities are in the model that we talked about. And then this is where we say the to entity foreign key. That should actually be the from, right? So that's our red, where from entity foreign key is equal to entity foreign key, and then the to entity foreign key is the to entities ID. So this is that associates with that, so that we have the blue reference. So basically we're saying this instance of the entity table is related to the from column. This instance of the entity table is related to the to column. Oops. Didn't mean to move that around. So now we can select the public ID as the from public ID, right? And that comes from the E reference here. So that E matches our E there, which matches this where statement. And then here, this F public ID, that F matches that F, which matches that where clause. I'm not as rusty with this stuff as I thought I was. See if it actually works. Here we go. Yes, so our from public ID is this thing that ends in DB, which is entity ID 6. I do remember that. And then entity foreign key 8. Well, that ends with D19, and then 7 ends with 967. I'm not going to take that at face value, but I will do a select entity ID, comma, public ID v from entity table where model fk is equal to 2. I just happen to know that that's 2. Okay, so 6 ends with the DB. That's what we expect. The 7 ends with this 967. That's the second row here. That's the 7. There's my 967. Those match. And then this was 8, which ends with D19. And there it is, D19. Beautiful. Beautiful. That's exactly what I was looking for. All right, so now we can take this query and we can get rid of those two because those are database only constructs. We don't publish those. So now we can just take the rest of this, collapse it down to one line, and bring it back into our code. All right, and now we're collapsing it down from public ID to public ID, and those are the actual constructs that the front end is going to use to build these relationships. That is lovely. So the only other thing that we would need to do to this query is add an ownership clause, right, to make sure that only the owner of this object is able to read and manipulate this object. Basic safety stuff. But we can do that here. All right. Is there any reason I started? Okay, so the question is there any reason I started with JavaScript when I already knew how to do it in other languages? So I had this as a C# tool, and that you could go download and install and do a bunch of stuff with. That seemed very heavyweight to me. I really like this idea that I can put a website out there that people can just go to, log in with their Google credentials, which almost everybody already has, and then just tinker with it to see whether they like it or not. I think that reduces a lot of barriers to use, because now people are like, oh god, I have to install this thing. Is it, malicious software? Is it going to, have viruses embedded in it? Or is it going to be adware or screw with my machine? Now it's just a website. So I think that really makes it much more usable. And it also makes it more usable on things like phones and tablets. Not that I'm expecting that to be a huge audience for this kind of tool, but the fact that you can pull up one of your models on your phone instead of having to install something, I think is pretty sharp. So let's see here. All right. We are grabbing all of our entity there. All of our entities there. All right, so now we're going to say parent stmt equals db prepare. So we're going to do another prepared statement. All right, big long thing. I love PHP Storm. It noticed that I had single quotes in here, didn't just paste them in blank, knows that I'm in PHP, puts the escape codes in there. How cool is that? Thank you, PHP Storm. I'm not using it in this case, but kudos to you for that. All right. So that's one parameter, is the model ID. The other thing I'm going to check is the owner. I need to make sure this person owns the model. And that is just owner V. So really, we're just going through and yeah, that's all we need. We have the model, we have the owner, and we're pulling in all of the cross-reference relationships for that. You know what else we can do, though? We can add some more checking, and e dot active b is equal to true. No, I think that's going to be 1. Yes. B. So basically, we're just making sure that the entities are active as well. There's no point in loading a parent-child relationship if either the parent or the child have been deleted. Helps if I spell active right. Okay. Now this data, it's model underscore ID and owner. I think we can just reuse that. I think that is appropriate. Yep, model ID and owner. So we can just reuse that. So now we can do parent statement execute on data, and what we are going to do is we are going to declare result here. And now we are going to say result entities is that. So now we're going to break some code. All right. And we're going to call that parents. So now instead of just a result object, which is an array, we have the result object, which has two parts, the entities and their parents. So that's going to break some stuff, but we can take a look at it and see how badly we've done if we go ahead and go there and then entity, take a look at our entity read. We just tack on the API there. There we go. All right, so JSON looking thing. Yep, we have entities. That's good. And then we have parents from public ID and then to public ID. From public ID to public ID. That's ideal. That's freaking awesome, actually. All right. So, now that we have all that, we need to go back to our entity loading code, right? So our user agent, JavaScript, line 276. Line 276. All right, here we go. And this looks pretty good. Now, this response has two parts to it, though, right? This JSON parse, I'm just going to say JSON parse the data, and then that response has 2 bits. So what we're going to do is we're going to call that the full response. And then we're just going to trick it to grabbing this sub-object portion of that full response. So now, all of our old stuff should still work. Fingers crossed. I break things all the time. I mean, I really do. All right. This looks like I haven't broken anything yet. Okay. So we've gotten this far. We've added data to this response object, and we haven't broken anything else. Now, because this is a parent-child relationship, we have to keep in mind what can be a parent, what can be a child. The nice thing is this is really easy. Notes can't be a parent or a child. They're just a note. An enumeration is something you can refer to. It can't be a parent or a child. So the only thing that can be parents or children are entities and interfaces. That's okay, because all of our interfaces are considered entities, right? There is an actual parent-child relationship going on there. So all of those get loaded together in this loop. So we just need to make sure that we load the parent-child relationships after this, right? Because we don't want to say another object is the parent and that object hasn't been created yet, because then you're basically saying, oh no, playing chair is my daddy, and that doesn't go over well for anybody. It just is a horrible, horrible day. So we make sure that all of these exist. So we just do it after that, and then we can deal with our creation and loading of parent-child relationships. So construct entities interfaces, and then down here populate parent-child references. Hooray! You know what? I'm not even going to copy that code because this is going to be fairly different. Bar relationships is equal to full response. What the heck did I call it? That is how good my memory is here, kids. Parents. User agent. Here we go. parents. Now in parents, we have, okay, we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that, get rid of that, and that. Narrow this down to the files we're actually using. All right. Now we are naming them from public ID and to public ID. Those names are very long and unwieldy. Ook. 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 Come on. Go away. Ah! Damn it. From and to, of course, are reserved words. That's fine. From ID and to ID are a lot easier to use and make a lot more sense. Back to the user agent. Here, let me zoom in on that. Makes it a little easier to read. There we go. From ID and to ID. All right. For var relation IDX. You know what? Shorten that to R. IDX in relationships. Let's just do a quick console log. Let's just do the sanity check. Relationships or IDX from ID, comma. Not that I get paranoid about my code, but it's been a full 30 seconds since I've seen my thing actually work. So, you know, okay, that makes me paranoid. All right, well, I don't actually see it. Oh, here it is. Yep. All right, there's the from, there's to, there's the from, there's the to. Happiness. All right. Find the entity, add a parent. Let's see here. There is find component by GUID. Oh, good grief. There it is. All right, var component child is equal to model.findComponent by GUID. And so that's where we're going to dump in this from ID. And then, if there's something actually there, we are going to wonder how the heck do we add a parent to an entity. That's all right. Let's take a look. Entity JavaScript. Please tell me it's as easy as add parent. Yes. Yes. Let's see. Function and then parent. Var parent, and then to ID, and that should give us the parent back. And so we just need to make sure that there is something there, because the search results can come back blank. So if the child or the parent doesn't exist, then we have another problem. Chat window acted a little weird. Okay. Child, parent, and if those exist, then we should be able to say child.add parent. Cross your fingers, kids. Uh-oh. Come on. Come on, you can do it. What's going on? Why are you not responding? You're normally very, very responsive. Oh. Alright, I'm going to save that. Hold on. Failed opening required. I know these exist. We did not just delete these files. Clearly something has gone horribly awry. I'm going to restart my hosting environment and see. No such file or directory. User development, Google App Engine. What the hell? What the hell just happened? Alright, you know what? I'm gonna copy this off real quick. I don't think any of this would have caused this problem. Alright, I'm gonna save that. We recently were operational, and now we are not operational. What the hell just happened? Alright, I'm going to put this code back in. Alright, you know what? I'm a little nervous about what the heck is going on. Commit my code. That's a typo we're not talking about. Alright. Source is up. I'm going to restart this VM. I feel like something's really, really wrong. And I don't know what that is. I will be right back. I know we can't chat at the moment. Remind me later. Hello again, Windows Desktop with this gorgeous diagram. No, I don't need to save it. VMware. Well, all right. Nothing horrifying yet. LiveCoding. Get you guys back. There we go. Thank you. All right. right. Seems to be running. And it works now! And that's why I did that. It's also why I committed my code first. Okay. Now, it does look like we broke something along the way. Yep. Child.addParent is not a function. Okay. That's fine. And I actually think I know what the problem is on that. So let's go ahead and open our IDE again and get back to breaking things properly instead of watching our dev VM just go crazy on us. This is why we dev on a VM, folks. It was an unnecessary sidetrack thanks to who knows what, but that was also an unnecessary 5-minute sidetrack. So, and it made sure that we committed our code. All right. So you use, for this find component by GUID, you can do, I need this child.object because it's a search result. So now so object type, so a search result contains an object type, and so that it has an ability to say none if it wants, and then the actual thing that got loaded. So that's not a huge surprise. Oh dear. Something else has gone horribly wrong. Boy, we're really full of it tonight, aren't we? Wow. So, what's interesting is our visualization is dying on us. And that's not cool. I have no idea what the problem is there. But if we look at the parents portion of it, they're showing up. And yes, that interface didn't have any parents. That person had 2 parents. That's properly from the database. So that means that actually works. Now it might just be that it's having trouble drawing the parent-child relationships because not everything is drawn on the screen yet. Yes, because this works. Alright, so the code that we added definitely has an impact on that. So we can defer this to be much later. So we're just going to move this down there. Make sure we get those marked right. Let's see if that... Nope. Find all the parent classes of this class, draw lines to them. So that is definitely where it's crashing on the visualization. And the target has not been initialized yet, is the problem. So I think we just need an extra check in the visualization code then. We'll move this back up here. And that is in what code? Entity visualization. Okay. Cannot read property W of undefined. So, okay. Target graphics. If target graphics dot size is not equal undefined, and that's a type of. Then we will continue. And that's actually everything in here. All right. Let's give it a shot. There we go. Haha! Right, just skip drawing it the first time. If the graphics object isn't together yet, you just skip it. Skip it. And it works. It all works. We are loading it from the database, and then we are drawing it to the screen, and that's another feature in the bag. All right. Now we're really getting somewhere, folks. This feature takes this product and makes it alpha ready, I think. I have to think about that a little more. But we can add entities. We can add properties to an entity. Those are all working. We can add references to other entities. We can add parent-child relationships. Right? We can, so like this reference to chronic conditions, let's get rid of it. Boom, gone. That line is gone. We refresh the model. Oop. Uh-oh. We refresh the model and it breaks. There it goes. Just didn't load right that time. We refresh the model and it is properly gone. Check the parents here. That's exactly what we should be seeing. This makes me very happy. So entities works, members work, interfaces work. The methods for an interface, I think, work. We'll have to go into that. Maybe not. So, because we definitely have properties. You know what? I don't know if we have methods. We have parents. So that tab is done. That tab is done. We may have to do that tab. Interfaces. That tab should be done. We can't. Let's add another interface and call it something really abstract. And then, so something abstract. Because an interface can only inherit from another interface. That's something that I just said, you know what, this is better software design practice. I'm enforcing it. So something abstract inherits from something really abstract. Okay, that seems to work. That's funky, but livable. Enumerations, we can create them. We can change their values. We've seen that happen. And then notes, we can add a note. This is a note. Array notes. Oh, that's not getting rendered right. It's okay. I don't actually. I like the performance of this interface, but it's turned out to be a little flaky. Now, in all fairness, that might be me and not the library, but I'm wondering if just an SVG using Snappy SVG or something would be more apropos. That said, it's harder to bind interaction to that with jQuery and whatnot. It's really easy to use Pixie Js. I might just struggle my way through it a little bit. So all of that works, and the code rendering works. We can just, here's C++, PHP, here's some PHP files, right? Something abstract. Well, okay, there's nothing in there because it's something abstract. But yeah, we can pop open the downloads folder. You can go through here and say, chronic conditions, create page. Open that with gedit. Oh, geez. That's right. It doesn't like doing that for some reason. All right, we'll just open it in Writer, though. Here we go. And, here's a bunch of code. And this code might not be finished, but it's in good shape. So, again, most of this stuff is at least in an alpha state. So I will probably be opening this up in the next week or two. We may be working on more focused deployments, and then I want to look into this actually real quick and see. They've closed. What else we can do here. So, quick break and questions, anything like that? Nope. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going then. So I am going to run some tests, figure out what we're going to do next week, make sure that we have our code committed and pushed. So we have our person, and we're going to add a method. My method. And the return type of my method is string, and that's fine. Now what I'm going to do is look at my database, which I don't have up right now because we had to restart the VM, and zoom in, and we're going to say MySQL, password, super secret password of secretness, use Draco model, show tables. Select star from member table. That is too much information. My property, new property, first name, family name, gender sample, ref to sample. Okay, so we don't have one called my method. Yep, here we go. All right. So we have to figure out what we are going to do with methods. Now, if I recall correctly, a method, so there is more work to be done, but a method is just a property that takes parameters. Now that sounds weird, but bear with me. This is why. When you think about a function signature, let's use C#, right? And I'm just going to pop open Visual Studio, and I'm going to say new project, data type example, and that'll just be console app. It's fine. What the hell ever. Okay. So here we have a program, right? Our program does nothing. But if we declare a property, right, for this class, right, this is a class program, but if we declare a property, we're just going to say int my integer, right? And sure enough, it'll take that, and maybe if we want it to be nullable, then we say int my integer, right? So that's fine. When we have a function, we also will just say private int my function. And then we declare a list of parameters, right? And then we are required, in this case, to return an integer because we said we were going to have one. But there's very little difference between this declaration and that declaration, right? The only thing that's really different with it is that this gets a protector, right? Or this gets a accessor, and then it gets a list of parameters. But when you look at the list of the parameters, there are also going to be things like string name or int age, that kind of thing. So these are still just parameters. These parameters are just variable declarations like that is and like that is. So all of these are really just different instances of the same thing. So I don't think I'm going to store them separately. The underlying data model I don't think has them separate, because that declaration is functionally the same as that declaration, which is functionally the same as that declaration. It's just the arrangement of those declarations that make them different. So that's why, sure, save that. So that's why here these methods are just a specialty case of the property declaration, right? So this is kind of our base case. And then our method here is going to be the same thing. And then again, static, so that's associated with the class. Deprecated means it's no longer being used. And these two options really, when we're modeling at this high level, we don't want to worry about internal methods, right? So these are really public methods that we're worrying about, or namespace level methods, internal. And then these parameters, again, are simplified versions of the properties that we do have here, except that you don't have as many options to change like the defaults and the lengths and whatnot. So here in these parameters, we're just going to say my int, and then that's going to be a single integer, and then potentially a default value, and then whether or not it's optional, which will have significant ramifications for rendering code, but not a whole lot else. So then we have those parameters list there, right? And then maybe it's a list of integer. And again, anything that we can do in here would show up. So maybe it's a list of string, right? So those show up. So it's not actually a whole lot different than what we've already done. We just need to do it again, and we need to make sure that our API understands the difference, and we need to make sure that the database understands the difference, even if the difference is just a flag that says, hey, it's different. So that's a problem for another day, but we're really close, because that's the only tab left I'm seeing of the entire thing that needs additional love before we go ahead and say that this is an alpha and is publicly available. So that makes me very happy. All right. Sweetjs.org is good for metaprogramming. Have I tried this? No, I haven't. So, one of the things that I find interesting, and this is, I'm glad you brought this up, CodeScript. One of the things that I find interesting is right now, all of the metaprogramming tools that I found are targeting one language or another, right? Sweeten your JavaScript. Like, that's what this is for, right? Is using JavaScript and then using the hygienic macros of Scheme or Rust, and you bring it into JavaScript, you're enhancing JavaScript, right? And that's cool, and that's great, and many of these languages need that. And there are other things that are, many of the code generators are for like Java, because Java code can get very verbose and people get tired of writing it. And so they create code renderers for Java, right? So here's one for JavaScript, there's one for Java. And so they're very target oriented. What I am doing, and this is an important distinction, but it's also very good. So they are very targeted toward one platform or another, which means that they're going to be very capable and thorough with one platform or another. And that's excellent. I do not want to detract from that at all. That is an important point. However, my goal here is that this is platform agnostic, right? So we have one model that, your model is your model, and you can have names in it, you can have spaces in it, you can have crazy funky characters in it, right? You can have whatever you want in your model because it's your model, it's your high-level representation. But when you render the code, you have a suite of renderers, and it doesn't really matter what your programming language is, that this will provide code for any language that somebody has bothered to make a renderer for. So it's not, this application's platform is JavaScript, but it will render code. It can render code to JavaScript. Here we go. Right, here's an example of it taking this model and creating a JavaScript, making a JavaScript class for it. But here it is in HTML or MySQL, and it might be that you don't use MySQL, maybe you use SQL Server. We just need to write a code renderer for SQL Server. Same thing with like C++. Again, this is crappy C++ code. So this is target agnostic code generation. How do you plan to represent a protected scope in JavaScript? So I generally do that by use of namespaces. And it's a little funky, I know, and this actually isn't the best JavaScript output code. And I want to go back and look at it. So I've been really avoiding things like require.js and similar products just because I don't want to necessarily show favoritism towards one or the other. That said, if somebody wants to write a require.js renderer or Angular renderer, you go for it. Like, that's part of the point is I can't use every platform. I'm not going to be involved and write a render for every platform and framework that people want to use. That's why I want to open this up so that people are using some esoteric language or framework that they can write that. So in here, I have everything actually happens in a protected scope. So I'm using the this kind of function limiter, and I know it has some pros and cons. This isn't supposed to be super duper thematically, this isn't trying to take a major stance on one JavaScript implementation style or another. It's just supposed to be encapsulated enough so that when you run it, you don't hate what gets generated is really, instead of being really opinionated about how the JavaScript should be written, I'm just trying to make something that is, good enough that most people go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I know it can also be better. This was my first cut. What's interesting is this first cut was also used actually earlier in this project. I would generate this JavaScript, and then that would become the source code under the hood for this project. So, for example, I can take this, render code. So the other thing that I have to do with this is I have figured out on the other ones how to make it so that it will download the code as a file instead of having to copy and paste it. And I've got to do that with this one because this is a pain in the butt. Thankfully, that's actually pretty easy to do. Right, so I can take that code. Oh, how do you mean like protected the member accessor? That's going to be really language dependent. JavaScript, it doesn't really have one. Yeah, it doesn't have the C# equivalent of protected. There are ways that you can do it with the use. I'm pretty sure you can do it by using the prototype for objects, except that when I create JavaScript objects, I avoid using the prototypes and the this statement in JavaScript because those cause so much confusion. So I don't really get a protected type, or I don't get a protected accessor modifier like you get in C#. And that's, for me, that's just kind of one of the things with JavaScript that you don't get. Not every programming language is designed, similarly. And some people might use that in their prototype or whatnot, and so they might write a renderer designed with that ideology in mind. But I accept as part of my JavaScript ideology that it doesn't happen. I don't get some of those features, and other people, will or won't agree with that. But that's why we may find that there are many different renderers, again, some very ideologically strong that are, have statements of, yes, I'm going to use this statement and whatnot. Is it because it's not an OO language or because it's actually a functional language? As a good, thoughtful question as that is, and I really do think it is a good, thoughtful question, is it because it's a OO language or a functional language? I think it's really because a lot of JavaScript is a hack. That they have piled in a bunch of crap and bolted it on, and some of the things have worked better than others. And there are all of these vestiges of ideologies that have kind of gone to the wayside, which is why you end up with some of the strange this constructors and whatnot. Back when JavaScript really tried to be like Java instead of just kind of embracing its own nature. So its history is kind of janky enough that leads to some of the weird JavaScript-y issues that we have today. Any thoughts on doing metaprogramming against the more functional techniques? It's worth investigating. It's not something that I've done a lot of. The truth be told, I don't do a lot of functional programming. Not because I haven't been interested in it. I've worked with Haskell a bit, and I've worked with some of the other functional languages. However, I have never in my professional career actually had a reason to use a functional language. So I think that kind of says a lot right there. As much as I think that they're interesting and potentially useful, yeah, I mean, JavaScript is under the hood of functional language, but it's not really often used like a functional language, and it does have side effects and things like that, which are very much more strongly verboten in languages like Haskell. But it's, JavaScript is really used as a procedural language, even though it is architecturally, I can see why it may be a functional language, but lexical scoping and functions are first class. Functional language, yeah. Did I do all the UI for this? Yes, I did. Well, so I used a library, but I wrote the UI. So the library is Pixie Js, and it's a really nice library. These guys, so it's designed for gaming. I've done a fair amount of game programming, so I'm very comfortable with the kind of the philosophy that's used and the function calls and whatnot, and how it's designed. So I really do like Pixie Js. I find it easy to use. Again, largely because I'm used to doing game programming, and so I understand the idea of textures and many of these graphics calls that I have doing. That said, we have found a couple of bugs, and so I am earlier in this evening I've been kind of waffling as do we stick with Pixie or do we go with something else? But I really do like the performance that Pixie gives us. There's a ninja behind me waiting to strike, most likely. Oh wait, the ninja's asleep. We're good. Okay, that's going to wrap up my session for this evening, I think. If anybody has any last-minute questions or thoughts as I wrap up, go ahead, toss them into chat. I'll hang out and chat for a couple more minutes, but I am going to shut this one down. Thank you for tuning in. Again, if you got something out of this, please, by all means, hit that like button, hit that heart button, hit that smiley face button, whatever platform you're on, and go ahead, send out a share if you think you know somebody else who might get something out of this and think that it's a neat kind of project. I'd love to have more folks in on this, and especially as we start getting closer to a public alpha. So, have a wonderful evening, everyone, and I will see you next week. Happy coding.